Good morning, New Hope. Man, you guys sound good. You look good today. I am so excited to be with you all. My name is Jesse, and if you missed last week, I am a friend of Rob and Bethany. I almost mistakenly called him Moose because that's what I have called him since we were in college. And so if you don't know, Rob and I have been friends since college, actually since our freshman year of college. And last week I was here and I got to share. Rob called me a few months ago and he told me he was getting the party pack on hip replacements and asked me if I would come and fill in a few times. And I said I would be thrilled to get the chance to do that. And so I serve as the director of multiplication for the Wesleyan Church, so I help people plant churches all over the country, and that's what I get to do. But I've been a church planter and a pastor for years and years and years up until this last season. Over the last 6 or 7 years, where now all I do is help people plant churches across the country. And so last week when I was with you, I shared a few Rob stories, and I told you last week that with those Rob stories that I would make him look good last week. But I told you also that I had a lot of dirt on Rob and that I would share some stories this week that maybe would not make him look quite as good, right? And so just as a way of doing that, as we were going through this week and I was preparing for this week, I had all kinds of stories that came to mind. The trouble is that most of those stories, I thought, boy, I'm not sure they're appropriate to share at church. But then I came here, and I've already had 4 different stories shared with me this morning that made me go, yeah, this is pretty benign. I'm going to tell this story. So I apologize ahead of time. So today we're going to be talking about runners, and we're going to jump into that a little bit. So just so you know, I'm telling a Rob story ahead of time. Rob, I'm sorry. I'm not, but it's hilarious. I'm sorry, Rob, just for the sake of the camera here. So here's the deal. When I was in college, freshman year, we were living in a dorm. Rob and I both lived in a dorm called Williams Hall. We all called it Bill Hall. Bill Hall was the last dorm on campus that shared a public restroom. All the other dorms on campus had been remodeled or rebuilt, and they all had individual suites, like everybody does now, which is really cool and awesome. But not Bill Hall. Bill Hall, we were true community. Every floor had its own, kind of public restroom, and so we shared showers together, but we weren't barbarians. They were individual shower stalls. But if you know Rob at all, he is a stinking barbarian. That is Rob, right? And so let me just tell you, Rob is awesome at helping create runners. That's the thing. This is a story about runners, and Rob is great at helping create runners. I just remember one night, really late at night, early in the morning, I had come in and was going to get ready for bed, had gone in and was in the shower. And I don't want to create mental images, so I shower, just so you know, I shower in a wetsuit. If that helps you at all. So here I am in the shower, minding my own business, and along comes someone into the restroom. Now remember, this is a shower that has its own individual stall, and then it has a shower curtain, and then there's a dressing room and a shower curtain. Double protection. You following me? I'm in the shower portion, shower curtain, dressing room, shower curtain, then the main restroom. Here comes Rob. I'm going to do my best Rob impression. Whoop-de-doo, 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 as he walks into the shower. Does that sound like Rob? Sings everywhere he goes, comes walking in bigger than life, and I hear him walk in. And as he walks in, it's unmistakably Rob. And because I'm an idiot from the shower, I go, Moose! And then it went silent. And I hear, Jess? Is that my good friend Jess? And then I start hearing this whoosh of shower curtains getting ripped open. Whoosh, whoosh, as he looks shower to try and find his good friend Jess. Pause right there. Because he's working his way down the showers, and I'm the only one in there. And I begin to voice my alarm, if you will, of a giant moose coming, working his way to my shower, of which I was fully clothed, if you remember that, as he's coming my way. Now, here's the deal. Rob created a runner out of me because I was trying to climb out of that shower before he got there. But apparently, all the commotion also woke up most of the floor because here comes the RAs running down the hall. What's going on? We created quite a scene with a whole lot of runners. So that's your first Rob story for the day. Just want to let you know, it has nothing to do with the rest of what we're going to talk about today, but I promised you a Rob story. So there you go. That's how you get to picture Rob for the rest of the day. Now, last week we started this series, we started, I guess. We got to the second week of the series called Off Script. And in this series, Off Script, we're talking about what happens when God doesn't do what you think he should do. See, this picture of God, sometimes he doesn't do exactly what you think. And I think sometimes when we think about God, we kind of picture him like a giant vending machine in the sky, don't we? We kind of picture him like this cosmic vending machine, and if we just like say the right things, push all the right buttons, we get what we put in, right? So if we go, to the vending machine, we push E21, out comes M&Ms. And I'm kind of an M&M guy. When it comes to candy, I'm a chocolate kind of guy. M&Ms all the way. Any M&M folks? Yeah, right? Don't give me the Skittles. I don't want the fruit candy. As a matter of fact, that's the worst Halloween prank. When you mix the M&Ms and the Skittles, the absolute worst. Shame on you. Can I get an amen? Amen. Right on. And every once in a while, you're doing all the right things, and you're out there, and you're kind of plugging in to the cosmic vending machine in the sky, because sometimes that's how we think of God. And instead of M&Ms, God gives you Skittles. And it's weird when that happens, because when that happens, all of us have different responses. If your vending machine gives you the wrong thing, are you the person that's like, no, I'm going to double down, and you throw another quarter in and you go for it again? Right? Some of us do that. There are others of us who are like, no. That was my quarter. You took my quarter. And so you start to rock the vending machine. You just get mad, right? And then there are others of us who are like, I'm going to need to speak to a manager. I'm going to have God, I don't know who I have to go over here, but we're going to have to talk to somebody that could take care of this, because this is not what we signed up for. Last week, we talked about when God goes off script, and, one of our responses is sometimes to reach back. And we go to some unhealthy things in our past. And we talked about what it looked like when we reach back. This week, I think we should look at what happens when God goes off script and we get the Skittles instead of the M&Ms. And it shocks us. And maybe the reason it shocks us, and Albert Tate, the author of the book Disobedient God, he suggests maybe the reason it shocks us is because we're not actually asking for God what God wants. We're actually prescribing to God what we want. And it becomes absolutely devastating when he goes off script, because it's not what we want anymore. When that happens, what we do is we turn and we run. Now think about how crazy this is. Think about how crazy this is. We've been saying, God, I just wish I knew what your plan for my life was. God, I just want you to speak and just get clear to me. God, I just want you to tell me exactly. I'm ready for whatever you want. And then God says, well, here's what I want you to do. And then we're like, nope, and we're out. It is kind of funny, because do you know that you were built for exactly what God has called you to do? You were made for it. I'm a guy that grew up around horses. I was raised actually on the back of a horse. My parents met as teenagers riding horses. Therefore, that was just a part of my story. So genuinely, before I could walk, I was riding a horse. And when I was really young, my parents bought a horse that was actually a phenomenal horse. This particular horse had been all the way to the World Show. He was a horse that was a racehorse, a barrel racing horse. And so we used to do a lot of that stuff, and I know it's not a shock to you because I have the physique of a jockey, right? That wasn't a joke. What's the matter with you people? And so I used to ride, and actually this horse was so well known. I would go to shows, and I'd like be in the ring warming up, and people would come up and call my horse by name, and I would have no idea who they were. People knew my horse. But it was funny, this horse, his name was Jody. Jody and I were best friends. We got along so well because Jody and I shared a personality. My mom used to always say it. We were just ornery, and we were sort of good, but we kind of were just a little bit ornery. And this is the thing. Like, we went on all kinds of adventures. We didn't just race. We also trail rode and all this. And I had this fantasy kind of being a cowboy. And I used to go, and we go on these long trail rides, and I grew up down in southeastern Ohio in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains where it was just beautiful, and I grew up on literally a few hundred acres. And I just thought, growing up, I thought everybody had that, and so it was just kind of a playground, and I could go out, and I could get on a horse, and I could ride the trails in the woods and never have to open a gate, and I could go for hours. And I had this picture, like this romanticized picture that I could go and I would get on a horse and maybe get my gun and we could ride out in the woods and I could maybe harvest my dinner and then drag it back to camp, break it down, cook it over a fire, have dinner. Anyone else see this picture? Am I the only one that had kind of this? I know, it's weird, right? But one year I was a freshman in college. After Thanksgiving break, I stayed an extra day so that I could hunt for the first day of deer season, something that my family did. And so that particular day, I was lucky enough to harvest a deer. And when you know that particular year, that deer was in the deepest valley, the furthest away from any place that you could get a vehicle. And I'm standing there looking at it, and I'm thinking, how am I going to get this 200-pound deer out of this valley? And then I thought to myself, this is the moment I've been waiting for. And I got up and I hightailed it back to the barn. And again, in my mind, this is what's happening. In my mind, I'm wearing a slicker. I've got the cowboy hat, and I go and I grab Jody out. And just remember, this is Jody. He is an athlete. This horse is 1,000 pounds of muscle. He is just primed and ready to go, and he will do anything I ask him to do because we are connected at the brain and at the heart. And so I take Jody, I saddle him up, I get him looking just as good as I can be, and I go over and I throw it up, and I have this picture, man from Snowy River. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about. That's the picture I have, and I sling up on him. In reality, I look like a Blaze Orange Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. That's what I look like, but that's what I did. I jumped up on top of him, and I just galloped out through the fields. Here we go. What I actually was doing was this. And we get out there, and I weave Jody down through the woods, all the way down through the brush, until we come to this zombie deer. Now, I was smart enough to know that I should probably let Jody experience this deer that's laying on the ground, which I did. And he had this response. Oh, boy! Woo! There's something there that shouldn't be there. But he got his wits about him, and we all calmed down, and everything was fine. So I climb off, and I take my lasso, and I rope that deer, and I wrap the other end of that thing around the horn of that saddle, and I climb up on top, and everything was awesome. Until that zombie deer started chasing that 1,000-pound horse up out of that valley. And all of a sudden, this horse, who was created for dragging heavy things, who was made for this deal, who knew that he could trust me if only he would do what I ask, this horse who had no reason not to do what I ask, became a runner. And I mean not just any runner, but I mean a runner with me holding on for dear life and a zombie deer trailing 50 feet behind him like this. And we laugh at this story, right? But in some ways, that's how ludicrous it is when we stop and think about how we approach God's call on our lives sometimes. Because here we are, some of us, we're close enough to hear God. We've been built for exactly what it is that God wants to do in us and through us. And then God says, here's your call. Here's the thing I want from you. Here's your next step. And we're like, I'm gone. And we're out. We see a story in the Old Testament. And it's funny because if you are a church person or not a church person, whether you grew up in the church or not, you likely have heard this story before. It's the story of a man named Jonah. And this guy named Jonah, it's only 4 chapters. The entire story, 58 verses. You can read it in just a few minutes. But there's a lot that happens in this story. And it's a story that's all about a runner. So let me ask you this. When God speaks, are you a runner or are you a risker? Are you a runner or are you a risker? That's really the big idea for today. And so let me just kind of think about and unpack this idea of what runners really look like, what it really looks like to be a runner. In the very beginning of the book of Jonah, we see what a runner does. A runner tends to evade rather than pursue. The very first verse in the book of Jonah, God says, I want you to go to Nineveh. Now remember, Jonah is a prophet, which is someone who hears God's voice and then speaks for God. He hears God says, I want you to go to Nineveh. Jonah has a strong reaction to that. He does not want to go to Nineveh. So you get to the third verse, and guess what Jonah does? It says, he goes away from God. It actually says, but Jonah got up and went in the opposite direction. God gives him one command, one thing. I want you to go to Nineveh. And he gets up and he says, I'm out. The opposite direction. See, runners tend to evade rather than pursue. The first church we planted 20-some years ago, one of our staff people was heading from the office, and he was heading back to his house, and he was going through kind of a residential areas on a main road. He's going along, and he passes a police officer. He happened to have a little bit of a heavy foot that day. As he passed the police officer, he looks in his rearview mirror, and he sees the police officer is making a U-turn. And as he does that, he just kind of goes around a little bit of a corner, and he sees that as he goes around that corner, he goes out of sight of the police officer. And he thinks to himself, here's my chance. So he makes a turn into a neighborhood. And he goes into that neighborhood, and he quickly makes another right turn, then another left turn. He kind of goes weaving through this neighborhood. And he's watching his rearview mirror, and no police officer in sight. And he thinks to himself, I just avoided a ticket. And so he's pretty happy with himself. Shame on him, terrible idea. He goes all the way through this, and he gets back to where he's going to come out on another main road, feeling very proud of himself. He gets to that main road, pulls up, all smug, all happy, and as he gets to that main road, turns on his blinker, looks this way, and guess who's coming down the main road? Sure enough, whoop, whoop. Pulls him over. Police officer walks up to the window, and he says, young man, I should cite you for evading the police. Staff guy, he was shocked. He says, I wasn't evading. He goes, then what were you doing? He goes, I was avoiding, right? And some of us are like that. Like, we're like, God, what do you mean? I'm not evading. I'm avoiding what you're asking me to do. Listen, I love New Hope Church. I just love this church. I've known about this church for a lot of years. I've known about this church from the time Rob came here. And I learned about the history of this church at that time. Last week when I was here, you showed a video, and it talks about how this Loudonville didn't need a church. It needed a different church. Remember that? You've seen that video, I'm sure, if you come here. If you're watching online, you've probably seen that video too. If you haven't, this is the whole story of how this is a different church, a church that speaks the language that needed to be spoken here. But the cool thing is, it didn't just have this church. This actually birthed multiple churches. And I can just tell you this, and if I'm letting the cat out of the bag, I'm sorry, Rob, but this is the deal. I know that there's a vision for lots of churches. Listen to me, and I'm about to get all fired up because this is what I do. Gone are the days where you're going to go hire hired guns to go and plant your churches. I promise you that. And the reason is because God is calling some of you to plant churches. The next church planters that are going to plant churches in and around this region are sitting inside of this room or listening online right now or sitting in your children's ministries right now. There are some of you who are sitting here that God is speaking to. He's been speaking to you, and you've been going, no way. There are some of you who are scared to death by the possibility, the thought, that even the inclination that could be a thing. But don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that today you're going to get up and you're going to plant a church. There's probably some kind of steps in between here and there. Maybe what he's asking you to do is to walk across the street. Maybe what he's asking you to do is to walk into your school, high school students, or walk into your school, college students, and to have a conversation with the person next door, or the person that lives across the hall, or to start a Bible study, or to whatever it is. You know what it is. I don't have to define it for you. You already have defined it. God is already working with you inside of that. Can I just encourage you? Stop evading God. Stop running away and make a turn and start pursuing. Because riskers pursue what God asks. Runners evade what God asks. Next. Running will cost you something, and it will provide you with little in return. It says that Jonah went and he bought a ticket and he went on board. See, it's funny because he wasn't actually going anywhere, but he actually paid something. He actually went and paid something to go nowhere. See, although Tarshish was a place, it says he went to Tarshish, it's a real place, he wasn't actually going, he was just going away from God. So he's just running, he didn't have anything to do in Tarshish, he was just trying to get away, but he actually paid for that ticket. Isn't that crazy? And you're sitting here like, what's it cost me to just avoid God? Maybe, I don't know, what's it cost? Well, let me just throw some stuff out here. Maybe you're paying with a sense of shame. Maybe you're paying with some guilt. Maybe you're paying with the eternities of your children. Maybe you're paying with you fill in the blank. But it will cost you something if you're going to be a runner. Running costs you something and leaves you with little. Runners fall victim to the enemy's trap of disengagement. We just get disengaged. It says in the first chapter of Jonah that the storm came. If you remember the story, he gets on the boat. The storm comes, and it's so scary that the seasoned sailors got so scared they started throwing stuff off the boat because they were afraid the boat was going to sink, just trying to lighten the load. So they're all freaked out, and they start praying to all their different gods. God, please save us. But nothing seems to be working. And there's one guy who just is down below asleep. Guess who it was? Jonah. He's completely checked out, completely disengaged. And it says the captain goes down and is like, dude, I don't know if you realize we're all about to die. Maybe wake up and do your part. At least ask your God if he could save us. See, it's funny. When we start to disengage, it actually affects everybody around us. We kind of think it's just about us. What's it hurt if we just disengage? But it actually affects everyone else around us. Rob and I spent a month together in Israel. When we were in college, or towards the end of our college life together, we got to go to Israel for a month. We were on an archaeological dig there. And while we were there, the evenings, a lot of times we would play cards with other people that were there. And so we used to play euchre. Are there any euchre players here? Anyone play euchre up here? Yeah? Anyone? Yeah, a couple euchre? Okay. So quick euchre lesson. So when you play euchre, there's the bowers, the right and left bower, which are the highest cards, right? So those are the highest two cards. In euchre, when you play in a hand, there's 5 tricks in a hand, and once you play a card, it's out of play. You can't play it again. But the highest cards you could play would be the right and the right and left card. But once you play those cards, they can't be played again. Rob and I had been playing for a while, and we were kind of done. But the people we were playing against were not done. They wanted to keep playing. We had gotten disengaged, and so Rob, in true Rob fashion, would play the right bower. And then he would scoop those cards and pull them in. Remember, that card should be out of play now. But Rob then would, as he pulled them in, he would pick up the right again, and the next trick, he would go and play it again. And this was frustrating the other players to such a degree. Which was funny is should have been immediately obvious what was happening, but the other players weren't catching it, and it was hilarious to us. And so we're giggling, and they're frustrated to no end, meaning the game was ruined, and they were super, super annoyed by us, and they didn't want to play with us anymore, right? Here's the thing, right? We're making light of this. This is the deal. When we disengage, think about this. Jonah, totally asleep, disengaged. The lives of the sailors completely at risk. Did he care? I don't think he even thought about it. It doesn't say he hadn't even considered it. He just like, I'm not going to Nineveh. That's all I care about. I'm down here, I'm asleep. It is the enemy's ploy for us just to get disengaged. I don't care. I mean, who else is it affecting? Who else is it affecting? Runners fall into that trap of the enemy. And then finally, just a final observation about runners. Runners tend to fight to try to stay in control. At the very end, in verse 12 of chapter 1, there's this statement that Jonah makes after he gets awakened from his sleep, and it almost sounds valiant. He's like, yeah, it's my fault. The storm's my fault. Throw me over, and the storm will cease. And it almost sounds like, okay, fine, I'm going to save you all by sacrificing myself. But I would propose, I would suggest here that it's actually not valiant. That this is Jonah doing exactly what his character up to this point is inclined to do, which is, I will maintain control. In a final act of showing God that I'm the one in control, that I'm the one that directs it, that I'm the one that pushes in and gets what I want, I will end it all, period. I won't go to Nineveh. You will not get your way. Throw me in. I will end it all. Jonah's a little dramatic. Watch it. Read the chapters. Read the 58 verses. He's very dramatic. This is the beautiful picture about this. Jonah puts a period. But where you put a period, God puts a comma. Amen. Listen to this. Where we like to put a period, sometimes God just likes to put a comma. Because in this moment where Jonah says, I am done, period, God says, oh, I'm sorry, did you forget? I own the sea. I own the sea. I'm sorry, I wasn't done talking yet. I'm sorry, we're still in discussions here. I'm sorry, did you forget that I had something for you to do? Have you ever been in a fight with your spouse? Oh, I don't know. You guys don't fight with your spouse? Sometimes I'm kind of human. So every once in a while, Amy and I have a disagreement. Every once in a while. Yeah, actually, it's usually I have a disagreement. Amy's never wrong. I have a disagreement. And so, and sometimes when that happens, I make the mistake of when I have a disagreement, I make the mistake of thinking that the conversation is over, and I try to walk out of that conversation. I'm sorry. This conversation's not over. And if Amy were to do that to me, guess what I would say? I'm sorry. This conversation's not. We come back to the conversation, right? Because we stay in this till we get this figured out. Here's God. Jonah, we're done. God, boop. No, we're not. We're going to keep talking. Now listen to this. God says, I've got some good news for runners. Got some good news for runners. No matter how far you run, you can't outrun me. You can't outrun me. In Psalm chapter 139, it says, you can never escape your spirit. I can never get away from your presence. If I go to heaven, you're there. If I go to the grave, you are there. If I ride the wings of the morning, if I dwell in the furthest oceans, even there your hand will guide me and your strength will support me. Guess what? You cannot outrun God. So if you're a runner today, if God has asked you for something, even if it's a next step, if God has just said, maybe come and surrender here to me. Maybe just turn your life over to me. Maybe take a step closer to me. Maybe it is that you need to walk across the street and have a conversation, but maybe it is that you need to surrender into ministry for me. Whatever that is. If you're trying to run away, I've got some good news. You can't outrun God. Also, God is super persistent in his pursuit of runners. He is so persistent in his pursuit. I love this book of Jonah because I just look at this. If you just follow the pathway through the book of Jonah, just look at the very first verse of each chapter. It's actually even funnier if you look at the first verse and the last verse of every chapter. It's even funnier. But if you look at the first verse, verse 1:1, it's like this. God says, Jonah, go to Nineveh. And then go to verse 2:1. And there was Jonah. He cried out from the belly of the fish. Right? I mean, is it funny? It's one chapter. It's just one chapter. So 1:1, go to Nineveh. By actually 1:17, I think is the last verse of that chapter. It says, and God sent a big fish. And then 2:1, and Jonah cried out. He had a change of heart. Turns out, you sit in the belly of a fish, you have a change of heart. Now, you go to the end of chapter 2, the last verse there, which I think is verse 10, and he says, and God caused the fish to spew him onto a beach. Isn't that funny? So just follow the path. Spews him onto the beach. Now we go to verse 1 of chapter 3, which is a repeat of verse 1 of chapter 1. Same exact verse, except with one word, extra. Again. And so God said to Jonah, go to Nineveh. Again. And so then you go to the end of that chapter. He goes to Nineveh and the people repent. Go to the beginning of chapter 4. And in the beginning of chapter 4, now Jonah is mad. And he sits there and he sulks because he's dramatic. You see, God is persistent and he's patient. Can I just tell you how thankful I am for a patient God? Amen. Because I am dramatic and I'm pig-headed. And sometimes I'm arrogant. And sometimes I'm dumb. And I have to believe I'm not the only one. So let's jump to chapter 4. Because I really, as I walk through this book of the Bible, I was going, what's the takeaway here, God? Because Jonah is such a funny book of the Bible. Because at the end, I want things to wrap up really neatly. But chapter 4 doesn't wrap up really neatly because it looks like this. At the beginning of chapter 4, Jonah has gone and done what God asked him to do, but he's mad about it. That's not how I want it to be. I want him to be like, oh, thank you. I went and did what you asked, and now I see your way, and now it makes so much more sense, and now you have blessed me, and now I feel so much better about it. But that's not what happened. Instead, Jonah goes, I went and I did it, and now look what's going to happen. Exactly what I thought was going to happen, and all of these people who are over there in Nineveh that don't deserve your grace are going to get your grace. I don't even like those people, and you're going to be nice to them. You're going to be good to them. You're going to forgive them. And now I'm stuck over here in this godforsaken country. It's hot and it's miserable, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to have to watch you be good and nice and gracious to them. And I'm going to sit up here on this hill, and I'm just going to hope beyond hope that you're not going to do what I think you're going to do, which is be nice. And instead, I'm going to hope that you're going to rain down fire on top of them. And I'm going to hope by sitting here, I'm going to build a little shelter to try and get a little break from the heat. And just pray that I get a good show. Pray that the fire comes from heaven. But of course, it's not going to happen. I'm not making this up. This is in there. Read it. And then God sees Jonah acting like a baby and goes, oh, I'm going to send a tree to grow. And he grows this tree. This is a big leafy tree that gives shade. And now Jonah's like, thanks. So he crawls up under the tree, big leafy tree, because I also like this part, by the way. Hot sun, super hot. And it says, and then God sent a blistering hot heat wind. So not only is he in an oven, God's like, I'm turning it into a convection oven. I love that. I think that's too good. So God then sends the tree, it's leafy, and if you ever are a country person and you ever go and lay under a shade tree, you know that's the best kind of coolness, right? The shade that comes from a leafy plant or a leafy tree. And so now Jonah's like, well, it's about time you started listening, God. Crawls up underneath the tree, and then God's like, this is so good. This is so easy. And he sends a worm, a little hungry caterpillar. Chomp, 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 chomp. And the tree dies. And Jonah's like, are you kidding me? And then you get this verse. You get to this place at the end of chapter 4. And then God said to Jonah, is it right for you to be angry because the plant died? Listen to Jonah's response. Yes! Jonah retorted, even angry enough to die. Dude is dramatic. Then the Lord said, you feel sorry about the plant, though you did nothing to put it there. It came quickly and died quickly. But Nineveh has more than 120,000 people living in spiritual darkness, not to mention the animals. Shouldn't I feel sorry for such a great city? And that's how the book ends. And when I read that, I just recognize this wonderful picture of how God draws this conclusion of how ludicrous it is for us. Because remember last week we talked about perspective, and we talked about how we see things in such a weird way as opposed to how God sees things. And this just draws a clear parallel to that. You see, all the way through this passage, what we actually have is Jonah, who is absolutely committed to his way, absolutely committed to his arrogance, absolutely committed to him being in charge. He had run for so long that he had lost sight of even what he was running from. And maybe you're like that. So today, I just want to give you 3 things. If you're tired of running and you want to make a difference, you want to switch things around, you want to change your world, you want to lean into your purpose, you want to be a risker, listen, here they are. You're tired of running? Then I just want to encourage you. It's time to surrender. It's time to surrender. You see, Jonah didn't have a running problem. You want to know what he had? He had a lordship problem. He had a lordship problem. The problem with Jonah is that he thought he sat on the throne of his life. When in reality, by sitting on the throne of his life, himself sitting on the throne of his life, he wasn't allowing God to sit on the throne of his life. See, he wanted to direct God's grace. He was perfectly fine when God wanted to provide grace to him through a tree. But he was totally not okay when God wanted to provide grace to a city that he didn't like. And sometimes we're like that, right? God, I'm happy to take your blessing, but don't go over there to those people because they don't deserve it. God, I'm happy to determine what should happen for somebody else, but not happen for that person. God, I'm happy when it's this way, but not that way. I'm happy when you don't inconvenience me, but I'm not very happy when you do inconvenience me. You see, this is the deal. If you want to be what God wants you to be, you have to get out of your own way. If you want to be what God wants you to be, you have to surrender everything. And sometimes that seems super, super scary. So guess what? This is where you risk it. This is where you risk everything. But I just am here to suggest that by risking everything, it actually gets way less complicated. Because all of a sudden, you let go of all the control, and you let the one who is the creator of the universe, the one who authored it all, take control. And when he takes control, he gets to direct all of your life. But guess what? He's the one that authored your life anyway. So he knows best in the first place. It is your place of saying, you know better than I do, and I trust that. So you surrender. Number 2, this is the place where you look beyond yourself. Listen, there's a really, really hard movement, but a very, very simple action. It is the place where you go from here to here. Lift up your head and move your gaze from your navel to your neighbor. Move your gaze from your navel to your neighbor. I am more and more convinced the further I go in ministry that so much of our spiritual journey is all about the way we posture ourselves spiritually. So much of our life, our spiritual life, is done in posturing. And so much of our spiritual life, for many of us, is spent like this. I'm going to hold on to everything I can. When in reality, most of our spiritual life should be spent like this. God, put whatever you want in my hands and take whatever you want from my hands. Use me in whatever way you want to use me. Take whatever I have that you want to use, take it and use it. Put whatever you want me to use here so I can use it. The posture that is all about self will always keep us from pursuing the things that God wants to do in us and through us. And now, there are some who are in here today, and you've been hearing God speak to you. You've been hearing God say, I want you to take next. Whatever that is, I don't know what it is for you. I want you to go and be that next leader, that next step. I want you to step into a small group. I want you to lead, whatever, you fill it in. But you're just like, I don't know how to do that. And so here's the final thing. If you're tired of running, here's the final thing. Risk a life of faithful obedience. It's the most simple handhold that you can get when it comes to your spiritual journey. Risk a life of faithful obedience. There is not a more powerful truth than that. The words faithful obedience. Say faithful obedience. Those are the most powerful truths in Scripture. Faithful obedience. It just means this. It just means do what you know to do. If it's in God's word and it is true, you do that thing. You be faithful with what you know to do. You do it in spite of. You do it in spite of all the excuses, in spite of how I feel, in spite of what I think God should do, in spite of. And you do it in step with. You don't do it ahead of God, and you don't do it behind him. You do it in step with. So faithful obedience, that's how you become a risker as opposed to a runner. It's all about faithful obedience. Father God, you're so good, and we're so thankful for all that you do, and we're thankful that you give us the chance to come into a place like this to worship together and to hear together and to tell stories together, but to learn from your word. Father, thank you for loving us. God, thank you for being faithful with us. Father, I pray now for these men and women that as we just take some time in your presence here, that you would just move, again, by the power of your Spirit, in and out and through these seats. Father, that you would speak into each one of our hearts. And God, there are some who are here today that you have spoken very, very clearly to. There are some that you're calling to very specific things. Father, would you just whisper that once again? Whisper that into their life, into their heart, that thing that you're asking them. And God, by the power of your Holy Spirit, would you give them the courage today to surrender to that call, to say yes, and to take a step in that direction. God, there are some young people who are here. You're calling them to take some actions in their schools, to represent you some kind of cool way. And you've placed it in their heart. We haven't even imagined it yet, but you have, and they have. God, give them the courage to have a conversation with someone, a leader, or somebody that would help them move that direction. God, there are some church planners who are sitting in this room. God, I pray that you would bring about boldness for them. God, there are some people who are going to lead small groups. They're going to step into roles inside of this church and beyond. And they've been running from it. God, will you just echo those words? Faithful obedience. Faithful obedience. And God, I pray if there's any who are just holding on, trying to put a period, say, I'm not going to do it. That you would just not let go, that you will be persistent in your pursuit of them. Just keep reminding them, we're not done yet. We're still in the conversation. We're still moving forward. God, thanks for loving us. Thanks for being patient with us. Father, now stand in front of you to tell you I love you. It's in Jesus' name we pray.